Welcome to our third episode of Band Talk, which is sponsored by ASBDA, the North Carolina chapter, and hosted by ASBDA, the North Carolina chapter. And Tracy Humphreys is here tonight. She is the president of our chapter. And we are also doing this in conjunction with the North Carolina chapter of NBA and WBDI. And then also, excuse me, also the North Carolina Bandmasters Association. So I'm going to share a couple links in a moment with the bios of Phillip and Sally, and they're quite lengthy, so I'm just going to hit the highlights for you so we can get our discussion started. If you don't know, Phillip Riggs was the winner of the 2016 Grammy Foundation Music Educator Award and recently retired after 30 plus years as a band and choir director in North Carolina. His last appointment was as band director of the North Carolina School of Science and Mathematics in Durham, North Carolina. He serves as a guest conductor and administrator with the World Adult Wind Orchestra Project, held in Austria each summer. He's also served on the jury for the Mid-Europe Music Festival and the Summa Cum Laude Festival at Music Verein. I probably said that wrong. In Vienna. Thank you. He's a co-founder and conductor of the North Carolina Youth Wind Ensemble, and he is also co-founder and conductor of the Wachovia Winds Youth Ensemble from 2004 to 2008. He's active as a clinician and adjudicator through the United States, Austria, and China. His professional affiliations include North Carolina Music Educators Association, Phi Mu Alpha Music Fraternity, National Band Association. And in 2005, he was voted into the American School of Band Directors Association. So I will share more in his bio that I'm going to post in the chat box for you. And Sally Wagner retired after 40 years of public school teaching, the last 34 years as band director of bands at Eleanor Roosevelt High School in Greenbelt, Maryland, where she conducted 4 concert bands, jazz band, and oversaw the Dixieland Combo, clarinet choir, woodwind quintet, and brass quintet. During her 34 years at the school, her bands earned a reputation for superior musicianship and performance standards, and were recognized as outstanding by respected adjudicators at local, national, and international music festivals. Ms. Wagner's a MENC nationally registered music educator. She's received more than 24 awards for teaching excellence, and her retirement was noted with a letter from President Obama. Many of her accomplishments as a teacher are listed in the Congressional Record of April 29th, 2015. She earned degrees from Michigan State University and University of Delaware. She's a member of the National Association for Music Education, Women Band Directors International, and Maryland Band Directors Association. She's active as an adjudicator, clinician, and guest conductor, and writes articles for the Woman Conductor and Band World magazines. And she has authored 3 books, which are awesome resources: The Pursuit of Perfection, This with Her Husband, Brass Instruments, and then The Pursuit of Excellence. So can you all show some love and welcome our guests, Phillip Riggs and Sally Wagner? Yay!
Thanks.
All right. So I know with retirement, you haven't both had extensive experience teaching in the pandemic, but can you share your experience with maybe toward the end what you were doing, or how you have seen changes happening with the pandemic? And Phillip, why don't you go first?
Okay. So I made it about 2 months. I think, so I had retired the year before and was teaching half-time, still at the North Carolina School of Science and Math. And I guess the beginning of March was when our students were sent home, and we did the end of that year virtually. And for a couple of months, we were able to make that work with guest speakers, alternate assignments, more individual assignments. But just hats off to everybody that made it through the last academic year and has started this year. It's amazing talking to young teachers or old teachers alike. I mean, the younger teachers ask veteran teachers, well, how do we do this? And the veteran teachers are like, we have no idea. So we've never done this either. And we know less about technology than most of the younger teachers. So they probably had a leg up on us, actually. And afraid's probably not the right word, but more willing to embrace the technology, I think, just because younger teachers were comfortable with it. So I really haven't had much experience with it. I have done some Zoom sessions into classes, to try to help educators do what they're doing with their students, and then and also with just other, groups of educators like this. But I've not walked a mile in their shoes, so to speak. So I don't have any answers, but I have a couple of ideas. I think hopefully we can talk about tonight that will help a few people at least.
Sally?
Well, I retired before all of this happened, and all I can say is that the teachers who are frustrated, who are crying out on Facebook, who are asking for help, are just another example of how passionate we are about giving the best for our students. And so what I've tried to do is be encouraging to the people who seem like they're just at the end of their rope. And it usually comes on Thursday afternoon and evening and Friday afternoon and evening as the week goes on. But just trying to be encouraging. One of the things that I think the teachers have to remember is that a smile from them means so much to the students, on whether they're at home or whether they're in school, because this year is hard on them, just like last year was hard on them. And it's probably as hard on them as it is on the teachers, only teachers are the adults. And so I think, we have to step up and try to be as positive as possible. The other thing is, if you have something that works in your classroom, please share. When I started teaching, everybody kind of had their tricks and they kept their things close to themselves and nobody showed their hand to anybody, and I think that changed over the time that I was teaching. And we started to share more. And I think this is the perfect time to share. If you've got a lesson plan that works, if you have a sub plan that worked, there are no subs. If you had something that could be done in the cafeteria when they warehouse the kids, share it with people who can take advantage. Let's help each other through this. It'll end.
Thank you. Why is band a necessary part of our students' education, especially during the pandemic?
You want to take that one first, Sally?
Yes.
Sure. All right. Band is many things. Band is tolerance, because we all have to get along in the same classroom. Band is knowledge, band is music, band is emotion, band is freedom of expression and freedom to move, which you get, discouraged from in other classes. It's experimentation. It's, I think I said emotion. It's teamwork. It's a family. And those are all things that are, many of which are missing in other classrooms. It's pretty easy to teach some classes virtually. I think it's really hard on the students and the teachers to do band if you're not in person. If you are fortunate enough to be in person, even if you have to divide into small groups,
Mhm.
it's that personal time. It's the team working toward a common goal, even if the goal is a lot less, what's the word, vigorous than it has been in the past. To be working toward a common goal as a team, I think is really important for the kids. I think band creates, I saw a saying the other day, it was like academics make good thinkers, but band creates people, or some, there was something about the human element that is enhanced through participation in the arts.
Philip?
A couple of things that I would add to that is, particularly at the high school level, if a school's on a semester system, they may have a teacher for one semester. Whereas with the arts, band, choir, orchestra, theater, hopefully, we're with those students for multiple years. And so it's a different relationship. And
Yes.
we all know that, and we all love that. I think that's why we choose to do what we do. But I think it means even more to the students because of that factor. And I just, one of the key things that I had that Sally just touched on is, we need to readjust our thinking and give ourselves a break and give our students a break. And if you normally play grade 4 and 5 music and you're playing grade 2 and 3 music, so be it.
Right.
For those of you that aren't familiar with the School of Science and Math, the students are only juniors and seniors, and then they come from all over the state of North Carolina. And so a pretty common question I would get from students coming from really established programs was, what grade music do you play? That was always a question we would get. And for the first couple of years, I struggled with that question a little bit, but for most of the time that I was there, my reply became quality.
Yes.
And they would get that deer in headlights look, but as I explained that to them, they understood that. And one of the examples I use, and I think David will appreciate this, because we've all been to thousands of concerts, and one concert that stands out to me was in Symphony Hall in Chicago. It was a tribute to Harvey Phillips, and the first, I don't know, David might remember, 15 or 20 minutes, it was the 3 trombones and the tuba player playing chorales. Oh my goodness. They were so in tune and so balanced, and you heard all these overtones, and here sit all these music educators in Symphony Hall, and not a dry eye in the house, literally, I think. And then they were joined by other faculty members, and it was, and I think that was sort of the beginning of what's now annually a brass concert at the Midwest Conference. But, those 4 players literally could play anything.
Right.
But they played chorales and they made music. And I even explained to the students at Science and Math, it's not their fault that they asked me that question. It's our fault. We hold that number up to them, and we make a bigger deal out of that. And what we should be doing is talking about making music and speaking to ourselves musically, and then speaking to an audience musically. And if that's with half notes and quarter notes, great. But I really think we need to give ourselves a break and our kids a break from a technical standpoint. I'm not saying we don't expect them to grow technically, but we've got to meet them where they are, not only technically on their instruments, and they haven't been playing as much, so their embouchures maybe aren't where they are, but where their mindset is too. I think our ultimate goal right now needs to be for them to be successful musically, and whatever it takes for us to do that is where we need to meet them.
Right. Good point.
So, Philip, I know you've been busy adjudicating marching band. I actually went to one of the competitions so I could see the school I used to feed into, and because of the seniors and everything. And I was actually quite shocked what they were able to put on the field. But you started to touch on this with your comments, but what strategies are at the heart of rebuilding band programs as schools are back in person? And then how did the directors focus on making that music, but still deal with all these scheduling issues, the changes in classes, covering classes, and try to rebuild something?
You're right, Ruth. Pretty much the end of September through October, you can find me in a press box near you somewhere. And just yesterday, I was down at Sanderson High School in Raleigh, and we judged 20 plus bands, and it's amazing that the resilience of those students that really want to participate in that activity or a concert or jazz, that just happens to be what's going on primarily this time of year. But I think the directors that are being most successful right now are doing exactly what I mentioned earlier. The drill is easier. The music is not as demanding as their programs might be. I don't think I saw a single group that I've seen in the past 10 years that wasn't at least 75% smaller, and many 50% and more. And so again, we just have to meet them where they are and find a way for them to be successful individually, and for the group that you have in front of you. They've chosen to stay with you. And so we've got to find a way for them to be successful as an ensemble as well.
I think, if I can add on to this a little bit, I think as teachers look to rebuild their programs, because there's going to be attrition, you're part of something, and then maybe they didn't participate for a year, and depending how old they are, they've slipped backwards skills wise, and they know they've slipped backwards, and so they don't want to play because they're embarrassed or whatever. But I think, aside from meeting the students where they are and moving forward, it's time, and it's really important to educate the administration as to what's going on and why it's important. It's important to educate guidance. They understand that you can't take geometry until you've taken Algebra 1, but they don't understand that you can't take symphonic band until you've taken concert band. So my analogy for guidance was always, you're putting somebody in French 4 who's only had French 1. They're not going to succeed. Well, it's only music. It's the same notes. It's only language. It's the same letters. It depends how you put them together and use them, and your understanding of the bigger words and the bigger music. And I think you have to educate the band parents without lecturing, but you have to get them on your side in terms of, we've got some ground to make up here, and I need your help. So the rebuilding process is going to be ongoing. It's not going to be rebuilt at the end of this year. It may not even be back where it was by the end of next year. There are too many variables, and I think we just have to take it a day at a time, try to make a little bit of progress every day.
If I could just add to that, because one of the notes I had is we can all probably look back at different programs and say, I wish I had fill in the blank. But if we built a certain monster, maybe a marching program or a jazz program or whatever that we couldn't get away from, or there are other things that the community became to expect us to do, or our music community expected that. This is probably a once in a career opportunity to step back and go, I've got smaller numbers. I have these. Maybe I could have a more robust chamber program. That was one of the wonderful things. I'd be curious to know Scott's thoughts as well. But one of the nice things about the job at the North Carolina School of Science and Math was freedom to do anything, and maybe we would do something completely different the next year, depending on the kids that we had and the interest that those kids had and how far they wanted to take things. So, I would encourage everybody to really look in the mirror at what your program was pre-COVID, and be honest with yourself and decide what are some things I wish we didn't have to do, and some of those you're not going to be able to change. If the principal says you need to be here, then you need to be here. But there are a lot of things that, maybe we can rethink what's happening in our programs, and we can be happier, the kids can be happier, the community can be happier with the new product that you have coming out.
Making lemonade.
Right.
However, I just saw a cartoon on a Facebook post where the teacher was sitting at the desk like this, and you could see all the lemonade that the teacher had made. And then on the other side, the teacher was being pelted with lemons.
Hopefully not.
At our last episode, we had D'Amica Kempson, who is the teacher of the year for the Charlotte-Mecklenburg school system. And Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools have 147,000 students in the district. So for her to reach teacher of the year is a pretty big deal. We also had Michael Sanders, who teaches in the same system. And Michael and D'Amica have been at Title I schools. We learned that D'Amica, 100% of her students need school-owned instruments. She teaches private lessons, obviously not to her own students at school, but outside, just to raise money so she can go to pawn shops and look on eBay so she can raise money so that her kids have what they need. And then we found out from Michael that at one point at one of his schools, which has been a while, but in 1 year, he used $4,000 of his own money to buy instruments because that's what he learned you were supposed to do. And I know the pandemic has really brought up some things and made us reflect, and it's amplified the inequities in education. And how do you two think we need to make band equitable within a school district, even a state, and even our country?
Again, I think it's education. People don't understand music. Instrumental music is a very expensive line item. Not only do you purchase the instruments, and if you purchase cheap, you're going to be repurchasing and repairing all along the way until you just can't repair anymore and you have to repurchase again. It's expensive. A lot of times administrators and school boards look at that and say, we can't give that much money to music because we're not giving any money to football, or we're not giving enough money to libraries, or whatever. Many years ago, my first year of teaching, the orchestra director at my school said, we need to figure out a way to be self-supporting. And I looked at her and I said, well, what's the county going to pay for? And she said, they're not going to pay for much as we move forward. And so we started fundraising so that we could have what we needed to have. Now, we were lucky. We were in a community that could afford to buy Florida citrus. And we ordered it by the truckload. And Scott will tell you, it's no fun unloading those trucks, but it provided money for us to do what we needed to do. I would encourage anyone who has needs to find out if they're allowed to do fundraising, to investigate some different fundraisers, talk to the parents. What's your community willing to buy? And the challenge is to find something that people will buy over and over and over. I mean, you can sell candles, but you're going to sell them once. If you sell fruit, you're going to sell it several times. If you sell cheesecakes, you're going to sell it several times. So I found fundraising was the solution. I could buy the instruments. I could repair the instruments that needed repair. I could buy music every year. That's how we dealt with it. Not everybody can do that. I understand that. And I don't know what the situation is in North Carolina in terms of being allowed to fundraise even.
I think a lot of programs, especially that are larger programs, have to do that, just like you were talking about, Sally, just to survive. And I appreciate James being here. Is an arts coordinator, and he might could speak better to this or share some links with us. I know Con Selmer has done several, I don't know if you call them podcasts, but things together with is it ESSA funding?
ESSER, I believe.
Yeah, okay. Sorry, being out of the loop, I see it all go by, online, but I've not been involved in that and directly. But it kind of comes back to what we were talking about earlier with counselors or administrators putting kids in the wrong classes or that kind of thing. I actually have a whole session called Admin Speak, and the whole session is about dealing with administrators. And we basically have to learn how to say the same things we always say, but we have to say it in their language. And I think the more we can learn the language of what these funds that are out there right now, specifically for this time, that we need to get our piece of the pie, if you will. But I'm not the expert in that. But I do know there are lots of people out there that are and have done a lot of research into that. So hopefully we could find out who they are or where those resources are, because I do think we should take advantage of that if at all possible. And like Sally said, I really think, again, we have to rethink how do we get more students into our programs. I talked to a band director yesterday where I was judging, and their plan next year is to offer beginning band at the high school. They've never done that before, but now seems like a perfect time to do that. And I think Sally mentioned it a few minutes ago, but it was one of the points I really wanted to make is kids that have left the program. Yeah, if ever there's going to be, I'll use one of Scott's favorite words, and that's grace. If ever there's going to be grace, and we're going to say to that kid, look, we understand why you didn't want to do this online. We didn't want to do it either, but we'd love to have you back in the program.
Right.
They already have a horn. Hopefully they have retained a little bit of something from middle school or, when they were in. But again, just wrapping our arms around them and saying, we'd like to have you back in the program. I think you'd be surprised at how many students would take us up on that if they can make it work.
Tracy had put in the comments that her administration had no idea what the ESSER funding was. James, I don't know if you can hear me or not, but maybe we need to figure out a way that we educate the administrators as well. So that
I can hear you, Ruth, and that's a great point that you have brought up. And in fact, in the last state advocacy call meeting we had with NAFME this past Monday, we talked across different states about how we can do some more outreach to connect with administrators more on Title IV funding and Title I funding. Also the ESSER fund, since there's 1 year left of those. I think that Phillip and Sally hit on some great points about understanding and identifying alternate forms of funding. There are some great resources out there that really define how to reach into federal funds. And, if you know somebody that has knowledge about that's a really great path to go down. There's probably more money available to spend in school districts right now than there ever has been or ever will be. It's just a matter of getting to the people that make the decisions about those funds and what to do with them. So yes, that's a great way to handle this. And our organizations like NAFME are doing exceptional work right now on promoting Title IV and Title I in the legislative agenda in Washington. And it's made a big difference. Title IV is the only funding source in Washington that's, well, not the only funding source, but it's getting the most significant budget increase in the proposed budgets of any. And we attribute a lot of that to the success stories that arts educators have posted about that. So definitely something to look to.
Thank you, James. I appreciate that. And it's nice to know that's been discussed. For those of you who don't know James, James is now the president-elect of the Southern Division of NAFME. And Philip, I believe that's a post you held in the past as well.
No, I was on the band council.
Okay.
For NAFME, but no, not that big.
So it's great to hear that that's going on. I do know that today is Robert W. Smith's birthday, and there's supposed to be an announcement today that two of his former students who do not do anything music related as in their careers, they are starting the Robert W. Smith Foundation, and I'm not sure how far the impact will be, but they want to make sure that they are putting instruments in every kid's hand that wants to be able to play an instrument. So I know that's coming, and there are some solutions, so that it would be nice if the teachers could just worry about teaching and not how to get everything that they need. So is there anybody else who has a question or a comment you'd like to chime in with? And if at any point during our discussion, if you want to raise your hand or type something in the chat box, I'll make sure we get to it.
Ruth,
Well,
along the
Ruth-
same lines, I would just add, sorry, Tracy. We used to do kind of a survey of our band parents, particularly new band parents coming in, you know, because we had done that previously with the others, but to kind of find out, what do they do for a living? What, you know, what are their strengths? There may be a lot of parents out there that, you know, they write grants or they do something similar to that, that it would be easy for them to take that load off of you as the band director. And typically parents are really willing to help. At least my experience, the more specific you can be with what you need, the more willing they are to help. If you just put up a sign-up sheet and said, we need help at the band festival, you might get a few names. But if you say, we need somebody in the concession stand from 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock, you'll have more people than you need. So I think if you can do a survey of your parents and find out what their strengths are or what they're willing to do. I mean, a lot of them are stay-at-home parents maybe, or even if they're working from home, maybe they have more time, whatever they used to commute, you know, they'd be willing to help you put some things together. But that's a great resource that sometimes I think we don't take full advantage of.
Mm-hmm. Tracy, did you want to chime in with something?
Well, I was just going to say you stole my question that I had because I teach at a Title I middle and high school, and we have 20 kids in our high school program right now, and so there are challenges in multiple ways as far as that goes, and almost all of them have school-owned instruments. I mean, even the clarinet, flute, trumpet, trombone. The other thing that we're facing is I'm trying to reconcile. I have kids, and it is mostly the older ones, and I have more juniors and seniors than I do sophomores and freshmen. But trying to reconcile giving them the challenges that they feel like they need while dealing with instrumentation. I have a flute, a clarinet, a horn, a trombone, a baritone, a tuba, 5 percussionists and 3 trumpets. And I may be bringing a few guard members in a flute and clarinet, bass clarinet capacity, but you know, trying to find literature that doesn't call for 3 clarinets and whatnot, you know, it's just kind of hard to figure out how to navigate. I mean, I know that in some cases we can, you know, fudge a little bit as long as we're maintaining the integrity of the music. But if you were to look at a situation maybe such as MPA, I don't know that I want to take them to MPA at a grade level where they're not going to feel like they're getting a challenging experience or a rewarding experience out of it. And I completely agree with you that you know, you can make music out of various grade levels. but I just know that some of my kids are going to crave that technical challenge as well. And that's kind of something I'm wrestling with right now.
I think the chamber music route is the way to go. Even pre-COVID, I tried to make that a significant part of my program. More the programs before NCSSM, just because of time for the students there academically. But even at the middle school and with beginners, we always tried to have a bus load or more students going to solo and ensemble. And I mean, I know, Tracy, you've been good about always going to MPA, and I think a lot of schools have. But this year, or like Sally said, the next few years, maybe we tip that scale more towards solo and ensemble. And so you.
Well, and we're already pretty active in solo and ensemble.
I think
yes,
that's where you give those students the challenge that they're looking for musically, and maybe a second instrument to play with the other ensemble. I know I think the state has actually waived this year for schools that have multiple groups that older students can actually play the same instrument with younger groups. In the past, it's been they had to do a different instrument. But I know for you that may not be an issue. But
well, we just have one ensemble.
Right. So I mean, I know there are a lot of the old guard that are, you've got to go to MPA and you've got to do this and you've got to do that. And you know what? You don't have to do any of it.
Right.
Ultimately, you've got to look after you and your family, and you've got to look after your students. And if the best thing for those students is to go to solo and ensemble this year or the next couple of years, to me, then that's what you do. If that makes them better musicians and they're and they can have some success. Nobody wants to go to MPA just because we're supposed to go to MPA and have a miserable experience.
Right.
Truthfully, I wish people would go for comments and it would be about music. But our band director egos, I think, ultimately won't let us do that. So,
Tracy, Tracy, have you looked into the flex band arrangement at all?
We're not allowed to do that. See, that would solve my problem, but we're not allowed to do that.
You're not
and the only pressure I'm getting really is what I'm perceiving will be from the kids. I'm not getting any pressure from administration, and it's not even about me feeling like we have to go. I just know that's something that's been very important to them.
Sure.
And taking another thing away from them, I'm just trying to figure out the most graceful and tactful way to shift that dynamic.
Can you rewrite some parts?
Well, I've been very creative over the years. I'm going to see what I can do.
It's not really cheating, it's making the experience valid for everyone, the listener as well as the performer.
Tracy, maybe this is this year or next year too. Maybe go to Carowinds Festival or somewhere else where they can just perform and have a neat trip experience with it, if that's allowed at that point.
Or an exchange.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Or if you can perform at a local university or to Raleigh, I know they have ensembles perform there in the spring. If they could have an important performance, but it doesn't necessarily have to be adjudicated.
Right.
It's something to maybe consider. And if I could, just because I think, sorry, I don't have on my glasses, but I think it was Dave asked about sharing the survey. So for me, Dave, that was pre NCSSM, and I have no idea where those are anymore. But I mean, it was nothing special. It was like, where do you work? What do you have any free time? Could you do any of the following things? And I think we had a small checklist. So.
Scott and I had a checklist before Scott and you had a checklist. Scott and I had a checklist that said, could you help with uniforms? Are you comfortable helping with uniforms, with counting money? There were columns and they could kind of check off where they wanted. It wasn't specific dates, but then they went on a list that was phoned for volunteers. But a lot of times parents are very willing to help. You just have to find the right parents. Sometimes there are parents who need more supervision than their children. And that's not helpful.
David, if I remember correctly, it's either maybe in one of Scott Rush's books where he has extra things at the end. I think he's made a checklist for parents, which you could easily put on a Google form, but I'll look in the books and see if I've got that handy, and I can send you a scan if you don't already have the book. So I know, especially with the TikTok challenge and some other things that have been going on, the students sometimes are not able to focus, and they're acting out because of everything that's happened. And I feel like teachers are getting the brunt of a lot of things. But how as directors do we keep the students focused? And I think Tracy has been talking about that too, and still positively contributing when some students are not acting the best way, and maybe they can't control that.
I think one of the things that has to be a little bit different right now, until students are back in the habit of being at school. Students have not been in school. They're out of the habit of how to behave in school. We saw a video that our supervisor of music showed us years ago, that, for example, middle school kids used to have an attention span of 25 to 35 seconds. 10 years ago, it was down to 5 to 7 seconds was their attention span. And it's because of all the video stuff and all the pops on the television and on the computer screen and video games. And just think how fast the kids respond to video games and how quickly they can blow up things. And it's microseconds in between what they're seeing and how they're reacting. I think as teachers, you have to energize. You can't expect them right now, especially, to focus for any longer than maybe 10 to 15 seconds before you have them actually do something. I had there's a funny thing in one of my books about a challenge I made for myself. And that was, could I stop the band and say what I needed to say in 10 words or less? Because that wouldn't give them time to start talking or messing with their neighbor or looking for whatever, you know. And then once I kind of got into that habit, could I cut that down to 7 seconds? And the ultimate challenge would be, can you say something in 3 words and then play again? So in other words, it's like, too slow, wrong style, go. And you start over again. B, start at B. But can you keep things moving at a pace that forces them to focus or to miss out? As a thought, 10 words is tough. Start there. Don't start with 3. Oh, I couldn't do 3. I failed.
I think particularly too with younger students, it was not a music presentation, but a middle school presentation years ago, and the presenter said, particularly middle school students, but they want attention. They want positive attention, obviously. And I think some of this is where the TikTok stuff is coming from, and some other things, but students would rather have negative attention than no attention.
Yes.
And so if you can find a way, particularly with the younger students, to give each student some attention during rehearsal. Actually, Scott and I have brainstormed a little bit about this, but I've thought about putting together a session that's called "Get Off the Podium and Get Out of the Score," and particularly with younger groups, even younger high school groups, just take the podium out of the room. You can teach most classes, particularly if they're smaller, from anywhere in the room. So be beside the trombones. I know that sounds scary, but
Just don't be in front.
You may not venture into the percussion section. No. But I think you know what I mean. And then as they play something, you can speak to somebody individually and say, "That was really nice, Johnny," or it's third position, it's right here, or whatever. But just moving around the room, I think is huge. I mean, I try to do that throughout my teaching. Now, obviously, once they get to a point with the music and you're 2 days before a concert, you want to be on the podium and showing them some things visually. But particularly the younger the ensemble or the smaller the class, I think the more we can get among them and the more you can give them positive attention, they're gonna reach out for less negative attention because they'd
Right.
rather have that than be ignored.
In the chat box, Michael, say something if I got it wrong, but he has the Appendix C from Scott Rush's book, Habits of a Successful Band Director, and that should be your checklist. So he's got the link right there for you. So thank you, Michael. Do you all see a shift in what is at the heart of music education? And do you think we need to reinstate the programs of pre-COVID, or do we need to make some changes as we move forward from COVID?
I think at the heart of everything we do needs to be to introduce the students to emotion, to feeling, to beauty, to creativity, to working together. I think all of the reasons that we teach music are the same. But as Philip said earlier, I think the vehicles need to change. The way the music that we're choosing needs to reflect where the students are so that they can feel success. Years ago, I had a student transfer in from another school, and she'd only been there for about 3 weeks when we had our fall concert. We're lined up ready to go on stage, and she's jumping up and down. And I said, Nicole, what in the world is going on? And she said, I'm so excited. She said, this is the first concert I've ever put, 9th grader. This is the first concert I've ever played where I could play all the notes. I don't know why she was still in band. I would have given up years ago. She'd been given music that was too hard and not enough time or help to learn it. And here she was, so excited. I think we, as Philip said, we have to meet the kids where they are, which is crazy because they're in all different places, whether they participated last year virtually, some in person, some of the year, it was not at all, whatever. Meet them where they are, take them where we can take them. Do the chamber ensembles for the kids who need more advanced work. But I think our basic foundation, the bricks upon which we build everything that we do, need to stay the same. I don't know, Philip, you may disagree. I don't know.
That's where I say amen, I think.
No, I think you hit the nail on the head there.
Absolutely. Kind of like if you look at most of our concert festival sheets, the items that are tone quality, intonation, balance, blend. Maybe there are different vehicles to do that, but that's got to be at the core of what we're trying to get the students to do. And again, I've been as guilty of it as any other director, but particularly when I judge, marching or concert events, I just think if they had just chosen maybe in pre-COVID times, if they had chosen a half a level easier, they would have less stress. The students would have less stress. What they played would be so much more, they would have a chance to make music, not just chase notes.
Right.
And so I really do think maybe this is a time for us to get to do that. And again, I'm as guilty as anybody, a couple of years we let the kids talk us into doing children's march for our warm-up march. Well, it's on the 6th list. What were we doing? Or the Mercury March, which is ridiculous. We could have done a Carl King and been fine, and or whatever. And it was a great challenge, and the program was established so that those kids could accept that challenge. But I think I think with everybody's concern and the stress level that we all have right now, I bet if we all did that for a couple of years, we might not go back to chasing as many notes and range and things like that. That's just a thought I've had even before we got into the situation. And I think, like you mentioned with the inequity, I think this pandemic shines a light on a lot of things that were sort of there, but it was easy enough to get around them. A really good friend and fellow director and a great composer, Ed Kiefer, we taught across the county from each other for years, and I actually taught Ed's kids. I didn't know that when I took the job, but it ended up being great because I was a young director and he was a well-established director, but he was very supportive. But one year that I was struggling just with a stress level kind of thing, and he said, he gave me advice that a former principal of his had given him, and he said, what's one thing in your daily job that if you didn't have that, it would be better? And of course, all our answers are going to be different. I think for him, it was all the basketball band games. They did this and they did that. He was the only director. He had no help. And it was just, that was getting to be too much. And the principal said, well, don't do that anymore. Or do the big games, like the games that are inter county, or, the big rival games or something. Come to those. Don't worry about the other home games. And, I think if we all stop and think about that, what's the one thing, if there's one thing that really is the most difficult for us, I think we got to figure out a way to deal with that. And then another one's going to rise to the top, of course, but hopefully it won't be as significant as that one. And,
Right.
I think you have to be honest with your administration. And, I don't know that I'd say it in a full booster meeting, but the parents that are your officers hopefully are people you can confide in. And you could just say that I want to stay here and I want to be successful here, but this is going to make it so that I can't do that anymore. And hopefully if you explain that well to them, they would be willing to, if you can't take it off the table completely, kind of like the pet band situation, maybe you can lessen the load at least, and find another way to do that. Scheduling is always difficult. So how do you remedy that? For me at the middle school level, I was the first person to raise my hand to be on the scheduling committee and go with the principal to a workshop to look at different schedules and that sort of thing. And amazingly enough, in about 2 years, we saw the middle school band kids every day instead of every other day. So you have to be willing to do that, and at the same time, you have to think about the whole school environment. You can't just think about your program. But as we walked through that, I made sure to talk to the PE teachers. I made sure to talk to the vocational teachers. I made sure to talk to the grade level teachers. But if we did X, how would that affect you? And for the most part, it was a net positive for everybody. So when we started looking at that, the principal was like, well, I'm not sure what the PE people will say. Well, I can tell you what the PE people will say. I've already been to see them. So, it's more work, but, if you're willing to be a part of that bigger community, then chances are you can at least eliminate some of the stresses. You're not going to eliminate them all. It's just the nature of what we do. I think there was a thing online the other day talking about why teachers are so exhausted, and it's something like they make 1,500 decisions a day. Now, I don't know if that number, how scientific that number is, but if you think about it, just in your daily schedule of the number of kids you see, the various levels that you see, and all that kind of thing, it's no wonder we're just ready to plop down on the sofa when we get home. I mean, and a lot of it, you can prepare as much as you want, and there's still going to be the unexpected things that happen in almost every period, especially in 7th grade. So
I would believe that number 1,500, because years ago I read an article that said to move from one note to another requires 49 brain functions.
I don't think
That's
I
quite
have any brain functions anymore. we're closing in on our time here. You both have so much wonderful wisdom to share, and we really appreciate it. If you could give us one thing that these people, our attendees, could walk away with tonight to feel like they could make it through this pandemic and all the stressors, could you give us one piece of advice?
I have two little quick ones.
Okay.
I just read a thing that says a 3-year-old laughs 300 times a day and an adult laughs between 15 and 100 times a day. We need to act more like 3-year-olds. And the second thing is your smile needs to go all the way up to your eyes because it means so much to your students to see you smile.
Especially when it's behind a mask, right? So
That's right.
You have to smile with your eyes. Those are absolutely true. I would just say to you, you must take care of yourself and your family. I mean, as much as we all love music, none of it is as important as our families and taking care of ourselves. You're not going to be effective doing the other things if you're not. I mean, you might be in the short term, but in the long term,
Right.
you've got to take care of yourself, and not literally, but proverbially, is that the right word? You've got to wrap your arms around the kids. Actually, Scott and I had a counselor that used to always, anytime she spoke to the faculty, the first or last thing she would say is, they don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And some of you have probably heard that before, but it's so true. And we all do care about our kids. I think that's why we do what we do. And sometimes we assume that they know that. But particularly the past year or so, I wouldn't assume that, or I would go overboard to make sure that they know you care about them.
My last classes that I was teaching before I took retirement, with the pandemic, and I had a pulmonary embolism right before everything shut down, and I realized I'm just going to tell people I love them. And I had my 8th grade guitar class, and every class I would end with, I love you and have a good rest of the day. And when I resigned, I got the nicest message from the parent of an 8th grade boy saying how much that meant to him. And I'm like, wow, you never know what you say or do, how it's going to affect somebody. And it just, love is what makes the world go round, and relationships are the most important thing. So many thanks to you, Sally and Philip. I'm so thrilled that you agreed to join us tonight, and we'll be sharing this as a podcast and as a video that people can reach and listen to it that way. But you are wonderful people, and we appreciate you greatly. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Ruth.
Ruth, if I could share 2 quick things that I guess are sort of commercials, but if you don't have Sally's books, you need to have Sally's books and you need to digest them. I would absolutely encourage you to do that. And Ruth mentioned in the introductions the World Adult Wind Orchestra project that we do in Austria every summer. We do so many things for our kids. If you're still playing your instrument, come play with us in Austria. It's people from all over the world. All the rehearsals are in English. It's a blast culturally and musically, and there's so many incredible things about it. If you have an opportunity to do that, we'd love to have you. And if you can't go over there, make music with somebody locally, get in a community band or do something to still be a part of making music.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, everybody. And we're going to close out for tonight. I really appreciate your attendance, and Halloween's around the corner, and then it's a straight shot to Thanksgiving and Christmas. So you'll get there.